Good morning, everyone. It is Friday, March the 5th, 2021. It is currently 9:14 a.m. Central Time. And once again, we're live on the air. And I'm going to have to do something here. I know it's frustrating when you're listening and you tune in. You're like, just get to the sub point. Don't do all of that other stuff. But in this particular case, I have to. We are having a lot of technical difficulties lately with sound. Nobody can quite figure out what's going on. So here's what I'm going to have to do. I'm going to have to check and monitor really quick how everything is sounding. And I'll know here in just a second if everything is okay. So just give me 1 second here. I'm listening to us live. What's going on? So here's what I'm going to have to do. All right. So we seem to be okay right now. We don't know what's going on. I don't know what to replace to fix everything. We changed microphones and we're still getting some technical difficulties, but I don't want to waste any time talking about any of that. Let's get to the subject, okay? Let's see, what was the date? Let me look here. On March the 1st, 2021. On March the 1st, 2021, I did an episode entitled Sex, Gender, Transgender, Misgendering, and the Church. Sex, gender, transgender, misgendering, and the church. I know that's a mouthful, and a lot of times people will, I'll put a title like that, and they're like, hey, you need to put commas there, and yes, but if you do that, some places like Spotify, sometimes it won't show up on Spotify if you put like any punctuation within the title. So sometimes I do that just to avoid having any problems with our content showing up everywhere. I don't know why Spotify will do that, but yeah, if you put anything in the title, it will. So, but in that episode, sex, gender, transgender, misgendering, and the church, we kind of spent some time discussing where society is headed, which direction society is going. And society is clearly moving in a specific direction. And as Christians, we need to know how to engage the culture, speak to the culture, hopefully in a meaningful way, and realize that sometimes the way we approach certain issues, it's not very helpful. And actually, we hurt ourselves. We hurt the gospel of Jesus Christ, and we really don't do anyone any favors. And we sometimes think that we've got it all figured out, but we don't. Let me give you an example before we dive into today's topic, right? Before we jump into today's topic. Let me explain. Back when, as society, we'll state it this way. As society began to change its view on homosexuality, the church began to the church started trying to respond. And in many cases, the church response was nothing more than throwing out insults, throwing out little cliches, and not really dealing with the subject in any meaningful way. I think many in the church just felt like, oh, this homosexual thing, yeah, okay, whatever, the Bible condemns it, it's not that big a deal. And we may not have really been able to see that society was massively changing its view on homosexuality. And the church just didn't want to deal with that reality, so we just handled it in many cases in a very and a very unsophisticated way. We didn't look at it carefully, doctrinally, theologically, biblically. We thought we could throw out little cliches like, God created Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve, and boom, we were going to win the culture war. We were going to fix everything. And it didn't really work. It didn't really work. And it created a lot of hostility, and the culture just continued to move the direction it was going. And let me give you one example where Christians didn't really think things through, in my opinion. I know whenever I say this, Christians get upset at me, but that's okay because I think history proves Christianity should have thought this through a little better. But let me explain. One of the big issues that started being debated within Christianity and within society was this idea: can a person be born a homosexual? Right? Can a person be born a homosexual? In other words, you don't choose homosexuality, you're born that way. You're born that way. and the church wanted to argue and fight. No, 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 no. You're not born that way. You choose it. 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 And I always tried to figure out, why did the church draw the line in the sand to fight the battle there? Because I never understood our argument. I never understood how the argument was supposedly tried to prove some point. Let me explain. Just think about this. Just take 5 seconds to think about this. Okay, more than 5 seconds. Let's take a few minutes to think about this, and I'll try to demonstrate. So society was changing. The views on homosexuality was changing, and it was becoming a predominant view within society, hey, that people are born homosexual, they don't choose it, so therefore you cannot condemn the lifestyle. And the church, instead of offering what I would think would be a far more intelligent, doctrinally and theologically sound argument, all we could do is say, no, you're not born that way, you chose it. No, you're not born that way, you chose it. And I always thought, well, wait a minute, let's think about this. So just consider this. As Christians, we have a very foundational and fundamental teaching, and that is everyone is born a sinner. Everyone is born a sinner. We are born with a depraved and sinful nature. And even though someone is born a sinner, the sin is still condemned, right? So being born a certain way does nothing to do with justifying one's action or behavior. So why argue about, well, no, they're not born that way. No, you are born that way. Why argue that? Even if you're born that way, if the action is condemned in Scripture, then the biblical worldview would say the action is condemned. I am born a sinner. My sin did not show up in homosexuality, but it showed up in a number of other areas. And those areas, even though I was born that way, those areas are still condemned from a biblical worldview. Those actions are still condemned. It's still considered a sin. I still need the forgiveness that comes to me in Jesus Christ, and I still need to repent and follow him and seek to live according to his morality, even though I'm not going to do it perfectly. Being born a certain way, I don't understand why we would have that battle. Okay, someone's born a homosexual. Okay, you're born a homosexual. You have those desires. The question is homosexuality a sin according to the Bible? People are born a heterosexual, right? They have a desire to engage in sexual relations with a person of the opposite sex. But the Bible still condemns engaging in that activity unless you are married, and condemns it if you engage in that with someone other than your spouse, right? It's very straightforward. I'm born with that desire, but I still cannot fulfill that desire in any way that I want. The biblical worldview is, even though you were born with that desire, the desire can only be fulfilled in the following way. That's the way the Bible handles it. So why did we get into an argument about, you're not born that way, you're born that way? No, you're not born that way. Because, I mean, it would be, look, here's the way I've always said it. If they are born, if they're not born that way and they chose it, they chose their sexuality, then logically that would mean that you and we chose our sexuality. We chose to be heterosexual. They chose to be homosexual. And if it's a choice, that means tomorrow I could choose to be gay. I could choose to be homosexual. Well, there's no way in a million years I could ever choose that. There's no way. Everything in me would be like, no, not happening, right? Because I didn't choose it. I didn't choose that. There was something inside of me that took me in the direction of being heterosexual. So whether someone was born that way. Now, I'm not saying I'm not making a dogmatic argument. I'm saying sexuality, my argument I'm making is sexuality is a very complex thing. There's so many things go into it. People have so many different likes, dislikes. It's very difficult there's so many things that can impact a person's sexuality. We could spend hours trying to unpack it. My thing is, whether they were born that way or not born that way, why did the church make that the line to fight? Okay, you feel you were born that way. All right. Now, here's the biblical worldview. That is still a sin. Just as I was born a sinner, you were born a sinner. Your sinful action and desire has shown up in that way. Mine has shown up in another way. Now, what the Bible calls us is we both need to repent. We both need Jesus Christ, and we both need to strive to follow him. You're going to struggle, possibly, possibly for the rest of your life with that desire. And yes, Christianity would say you would have to abstain, and Christianity would say you cannot participate in that, just like Christianity tells a person who's not married they cannot engage in sexual relations no matter how strong that desire is. They have to abstain. That's the way it works. Why did we make that the fight? I don't know. It's like we almost forgot that people are born sinners. So sometimes when society begins to move, Christianity enters into the fight, and sometimes I think we enter into the fight in the wrong way, with the wrong message, fighting over the wrong thing. All right? And again, my approach has always been, if someone tells me that they're a homosexual and they say they were born that way, why am I going to fight and argue that? I don't know how they were born. I have no way. I can't get into all of that. I don't know. But I know this, you were born a sinner. I know that much. And I know what the same solution for you is the same solution for me. We need Christ. You need the blood of Jesus Christ. You need his imputed righteousness, and you need to follow him. Why am I going to fight over which way he was? Is it to make me feel better? Is it to make me feel better? No, you weren't born that way. You chose that. And in many cases, you have to ask, why would they choose a lifestyle that in many cases led them, especially at different times throughout society, led them to all kinds of pain and problems? And I mean, you just talk about being ostracized. I mean, back in the 1980s here in the Abilene, Texas area, there was a gay club in Abilene, Texas, and sadly, a lot of young people found it to be a fun Friday night to go drive around the gay club. And when someone would be trying to walk into the club or walk out, young teenage guys would jump out of the car and then beat them up for being gay. So why would you choose a lifestyle that literally you were ostracized in a lot of different parts of the world at that time? And it made you lost your family, you got beat up. Like, why would you choose that lifestyle? I can't explain. That makes no sense to me. It looked like you would like, hey, this is not working out so well. I think I'm going to go choose a different lifestyle. No, there's something deeper going on, which I cannot understand, but I can't understand it from a theological perspective. They're born a sinner, just like I'm born a sinner. All right. And what we all need is Jesus Christ. So what I want you to see is that society changes, and that sometimes Christianity, our approach sometimes just seems so shallow, foolish, surface, and we think we're making some major point, but we're really not. Now, I say all of that to say we're once again watching society making another major change, another major turn. And now the situation is, and we talked about this in a previous broadcast, so I'm just expanding that conversation. Now what we are facing is not even, homosexuality is pretty common and pretty accepted in a good portion of society. Biblically, we still condemn it, yes, just like we condemn premarital sex, lust, pornography. We still condemn it, yes. I don't think sometimes I don't think the church has handled itself very well, but we should learn from the way the church has handled that issue and take the lessons from that and apply them to what we are facing right now. We're now facing a transition where according to society, there is a difference between sex and gender. Sex, we'll define it this way. I'm oversimplifying this, but this is the way much of the medical documentation would do so. Sex is about biology, right? Chromosomes, your anatomy, biology, okay? But gender is something else. Gender is something different. Gender is something that society says these are gender roles, and society says that this is what gender is and isn't. But according to some of the documentation, gender can be how you identify, and that you may identify in a way that's not consistent with your biology. In other words, they would say gender is not based off biology. It's based off identity and a number of other factors. So society is moving away from a biological defined gender, and they would argue that there are not two genders, that it's not binary, it's non-binary, and there's a scale that we don't know how many genders there are. We don't have a clue. We don't even know where to fix it. Now, We may reject it. We may not like it. We may think it's foolish. We may argue all day for biology-defined gender. But we have to really consider what is going on in society and thinking it through. How do we address this? How do we try to figure this out and make sure that when we engage in the discussion, we are having a fight in the right way, dealing with the right subject. Sometimes we're missing the bigger picture. Like fighting over if someone is born gay, to me, is missing the point. My point is I want you to understand you were born a sinner. And you need repentance in Jesus Christ. And homosexuality is just one sin of many that is a result of the depravity that you were born with, right? That sometimes I think we fight the wrong thing. I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out how we're going to address this, but I've got medical documentation right here. Again, if you just look up on Google, the thousands of articles you're going to find is pretty staggering in regards to now where a lot of the documentation is going. But again, this comes from Medical News Today, and here we go. Historically, I'll just read a little bit. I read this in the episode we did on March the 1st, but I want to expand this. Historically, the terms sex and gender have been used interchangeably, but their uses are becoming increasingly distinct, and it is important to understand the differences between the two. This article will look at the meaning of sex and the differences between the sexes. It will also look at the meaning of gender and the concepts of gender roles, gender identity, and gender expression. In general terms, sex refers to the biological differences between males and females, right? And you can talk about the body, we can talk about anatomy. We can get into all of that, all right? They go on to say gender is more difficult to define, but it can refer to the role of a male or female in society, known as a gender role, or an individual's concept of themselves or gender identity. Sometimes a person's genetically assigned sex does not line up with their gender identity. These individuals might refer to themselves as transgender, non-binary, or gender non-conforming. Now, we talked about this before. That's where society is going. We don't have to like it. We can disagree with it. What we have to do is figure out how are we going to navigate this. And look, just like we did the church, look, we can try to push back on where society is going, but society goes its direction. Right? Society moves. It's always changing. It's always evolving. And listen, the church, what we have to do is not be tossed to and fro with every wind of doctrine. And what happens many cases, the church is tossed to and fro with every wind of doctrine because the church is following society. So as society changes, many in the church will try to change their biblical worldview to correspond with the new view in society. We cannot do that. We cannot do that, but we have to ask ourselves, how do we deal with this? How do we address this? How do we try to respond to this? How? Now, we could look at Scripture. We know that the Bible says God created them in His image, male and female. We know throughout the Bible, it speaks of men, speaks of women, right? That's how the Bible operates. Now, if you take that to the world, it's not going to matter. They're going to say the world, that at the time the Bible was written, they didn't understand all of this stuff. They didn't have all of this medical understanding. So you're not going to get anywhere with trying to make that argument, but you can identify that the Bible clearly it views that men and women are that biology and gender. The Bible put it this way: the Bible would not in any way indicate a difference there. It would not indicate a difference in any way, shape, or form. I think we can all acknowledge that. And all agree that it doesn't identify any difference. And to try to argue that it does would just be crazy. It would just be crazy. They're created male and female, and then they're addressed as male and female throughout the Bible. Throughout the Bible, men, women, husbands, wives, that's the way they're viewed. All right, and we could get to some scriptures where it seems any trying to blur that line is pretty clearly condemned in Scripture. I think we could probably establish that. So we have a biblical worldview. And then we have the world of where the world is going with its transgender. We'll call it an ideology. Now they would argue they're following the science. Now that's one thing we've got to be careful with, because sometimes we're we say things and they look at us like we don't know what we're talking about. And I talked about this on March the 1st. We can sit there and say, the science says there's only two genders. And young people today, people in the medical world are going to look at you and go, what are you talking about? You're talking about there are two sexes. Gender is something different. You need to learn the science. Having the scientific argument all day, I don't know where you may not get very far anymore. What we can argue is both sides can agree that there are two sexes. You're either born male or female, biologically, genetically. That is true. Now, we do understand there are times people, because of different birth defects and different things that happen, that people are born and there's different things going on. Yes, we understand that. All kinds of things we live in a fallen world. All kinds of things can happen. We're talking normally, this is the way it works. You're born a male or born a female. Biologically, there's no way to get around that. Genetically, XY, XX chromosome. We can talk about the chromosomes. We can get into all of that, right? And anatomy. So so we can say genetically, physically, there is two sexes, right? Now, gender identity is where all of the debate begins to rage and fight. Just make sure you understand that they would argue they have science on their side. Someone sent me a video of a medical doctor basically saying, hey, stop claiming science is on your side because and she points to herself and she points to all the degrees on her wall. As a doctor, let me help you understand gender is non-binary. And then she goes in to offer her quick explanation because it was like a TikTok video. But I'm saying that's where the world's going to go. You can make your argument and they're going to say, well, you're just anti-science. You're just anti-science. You're anti-science. So how are we going to address this? Well, first thing I want to do is I want to play an audio clip from you. This comes from Albert Mohler. He talked about some of this recently on his program, The Briefing. Well, listen to that. I'm just trying to continue to get Christians to think about this so that we don't make the wrong argument. Here's and I'll just say this in passing. I'll just kind of throw this out there. Someone can be born, and let's say, legitimately, we can't understand it because obviously I can't understand this. They don't identify. They just don't identify as the gender as the sex that they are. Let's state it that way. In other words, they're born a female, but they don't feel like a female. They don't identify as a female. They identify and feel like they're a male. Now, I can't understand that. I cannot understand that. But we cannot simply deny that they don't feel that way. Let's make sure we understand that. We can't deny that they don't feel that way. Someone just sent this, and I'm reading from the chat because we do these live broadcasts and people can chat. Some Christians can't believe that people are created to like people of the same sex or think that they are a sex they physically aren't. One of the sayings I heard at one time was that God doesn't make mistakes. So when people say that they were born LGBT, those Christians can't accept that. It's like they view people being born that way as a mistake, and that can't be. All right. Now, yes, that's some of the arguments Christians will offer up, and I'll engage with that right there to kind of advance this a little bit, right? And I know I'm just throwing out a lot of different thoughts, but this is the kind of conversation Christians and churches are going to have. The society is moving, it's changing, so we're going to have to deal with it. Now, when Christians say God doesn't make mistakes, now we got to be very careful what we mean by that, because everyone is born a sinner, right? Everyone's born depraved. So what do you mean? God doesn't make mistakes. Not only that, how about all the babies that are born with all kinds of different things going on? In fact, I have one statistic right here. Let me see here. Let me pull it up here in some of the medical documentation. Yes, in some cases, a child is born with a mix between female and male genitalia. They are sometimes termed intersex, and the parents may decide which gender to assign to the child. Intersex individuals account for around 1 in 1,500 births. Right? And you can just look at all the other different things that can happen at birth. So you got to be very careful saying God doesn't make mistakes. We live in a fallen world. And people are born with all kinds of things going on. And we are born sinners. Let's just make that very clear. We are born sinners. We are born depraved. To me, dealing with all of these issues with LGBTQ, all of the different things going on within society, we have to look at it through the lens of depravity. The Christian theology says we're all born sinners. Now that, because we're born depraved, it's going to show up in 1,000 different ways. 1,000 different ways. So you're telling me that someone born a sinner can't possibly be born with a desire for people of the same sex? Are you telling me that's impossible? That it's impossible for them to be born that way? Or it's impossible for them to be born with not identifying with the sex that they're born as? Clearly it has to be possible. Clearly it has to be possible. Now, the issue is, okay, how do we address it? Saying you're not born that way, you're lying. I don't know what do we hope to gain by doing that? Hey, you tell me, I know what you feel. I know how you think. I know what's real. I don't know. I have no clue what's going on inside of them. I have no clue what they're feeling. I cannot relate to that. So I have to at least approach them as, okay, this is your feeling, that's the way. Okay. Now, what's the Bible have to say in regards to those feelings? What does the Bible say in regards to those actions? Now, they're still going to reject that, but at least you're trying to treat them as a human being and not just trying to call them a liar for no reason, because you don't know. You have no clue. Look, there are people born with lots of desires that I can't understand, right? I don't get it. It's because look, when you get into human sexuality, and I always got to be careful with what I say, because I don't know, how people who are listening, if they have children. So I'll try to say this as nicely as I can. You can have people born with certain likes that it's hard for me to understand. There are some people who find feet attractive. That is bizarre beyond all comprehension. Okay, I don't get that. I don't understand that. That's insane to me. Okay, no, I believe sandals should be banned from the face of the earth, and nobody should ever wear sandals. Male, females, no one. Nobody wants to see anyone's feet. Okay, none. All right, see, I can explain that. Some people, a completely different view. I'm saying that our desires are very complicated. So to simply fight people by saying, no, you weren't born that way, no, that's not true, we don't accomplish anything. Remember, the dominant Christian viewpoint is, this is so important, that we're born sinners. We're born sinners, right? So people, a lot of times people say, well, it's not natural. Okay, well, we're born naturally sinners, going against our very nature goes against God's morality, God's law, God's will. We are born naturally going against that. So we have to, that's the position we have to start. So let's now apply it to all of this. I have no problem a person telling me they were born gay, because I cannot prove or disprove that. What's the point of trying to argue that? I don't know how they were born. I don't know. I don't have a clue. Now, you could argue, well, I've known that person all their life, and maybe you can make an argument. Now, come on now. Are you sure? Look, I can't put it this way. Arguing with them is irrelevant, because I cannot speak to their feelings and their desires, because that's something inside of a person. I cannot speak to that. Here's what I can look at them. We'll start with homosexuality. All right. You have a desire for people of the same sex. The Bible condemns that, just like it condemns premarital sex, pornography, etc., etc. So you need Christ. We need to follow him. You have to strive to live according to that biblical model, and you're going to struggle, and you're going to fall, and we're going to have to be there to pick you up and help you and to make you through this. Just like young people can struggle with the desire for premarital sex, and they struggle and they fall, and men it tends to be men and women as well, but there are lots of men struggle with pornography. We're all sinners. We're all sinners. All right, this goes back with other subjects we've been talking about lately. I don't believe you become a Christian and just supernaturally all of a sudden you have victory over all of this. You're going to struggle. We have to start with that. Now here's someone. Now we expand it. Now here's someone who comes into the church and says, "Hey, I was born female, but I identify as a male. Okay, that's how I feel. Now, I can't understand that feeling. Now, what we can say is from a Christian perspective, the Bible says you're created male or female, and the Bible doesn't seem to offer any distinction between biology and gender. Doesn't seem to offer that difference. So what we would hope is now we're going to have to work with you, hopefully struggle with you with these feelings, and see if we can work through this. If we can work through this with you. Now, we got to be patient. We got to show mercy. We got to show. We got to try to figure this out. And look, what do you do if someone's already transitioned? They've already transitioned. They've already had surgery. They've been taking, hormone blockers and doing. I mean, they've been doing all of this for years. How do you treat them? Now, again, I just raised a difficult question. I don't even know if I have a good answer. Now, some people would say, I would just say, what are you doing, you ungodly? And then call them names and attack them. Well, that's not, no. What I know, the first thing I need to explain to them is you're born a sinner, there is a God, and you need to turn to Jesus Christ and trust in him. Okay. Before we do anything else, we want them trusting in Jesus Christ and his finished righteousness. We want them focused on that first and foremost. That's what we want. How to process it from there becomes, very difficult. Can they just go back and then after they've transitioned and try to work to retransition? Very difficult. Very difficult. That raises some serious questions. And I'm telling you, I know you're like, man, you're bringing up subjects I'm never going to have to worry about. No, depending on where you live, your church may have to be dealing with these subjects. And I think in a far greater rate, you're going to have to deal with these issues. And we just need a meaningful way to discuss it. We've got to think these things through. And I know that I'm not just coming out here very dogmatic, throwing out, here's 3 points like a lot of Christian podcasters doing. I'm throwing out all of these ideas, just trying to get you to think about it, trying to get you to figure it out. We're going to have to deal with this issue. Society now is going to be dogmatic that sex and gender are two different things, and that your gender has nothing to do with your sex. That is where that's where the medical world is moving. That's where they're going to claim that's where the scientific evidence goes. And you can argue all day, no. The science says you're born male and female. And they're going to say, yes, you're right. That's your sex, not your gender. Your gender is non-binary. You're going to hear this over and over and over again. And the biblical worldview, how do we engage this? Now, the biblical worldview on a lot of issues, science, we don't believe in materialistic evolution. We believe God created everything. So we, in a sense, stand against much of the science and some of those areas. But we have to just make sure when we have the fight, we pick the right battle. And the battle isn't, we can't fight with, no, you don't really feel that way. No, you don't really identify that way. No, we start with the fact that we're all born sinners, and that sin has done great damage to all of everything. Our bodies, to nature, everything shows the negative consequences of sin. Death, sickness, disease, birth defects. You go on and on, all associated with the fall. Well, can't the fall be also associated with a lot of things that come to sexuality and different things related to that? It has to. To deny that is foolishness. I think you're denying the very doctrine of depravity. Maybe we need a better understanding of the doctrine of depravity. It literally impacts, sin impacted everything. Creation groans under the curse of sin. Everything in your life, from your mind to your will to your body, is impacted because of sin. And until sin is completely removed, we're going to be in a world with all kinds of situations that are uncomfortable and that we don't like. But we have to realize what the underlying issue is. So let's just briefly listen to Albert Mohler here. All right. That kind of didn't really go in the, I know that just kind of was like, well, you just kind of it's kind of like a stream of conscious there, just throwing out a lot of thoughts. But that's the way I'm purposely doing it that way because I I'm throwing out all these different thoughts because this is the kind of conversations Christians need to be having, meaningful conversations. And I know some people are not going to like it. They're going to think, oh, that's compromise. That's compromise. You're going liberal. No, it's nothing about compromise, nothing about going liberal, being progressive. It's about going, whoa, we're dealing with a changing society, and we've got to start thinking about how are we going to focus on this. Now, you can just stand there and call them names, be dismissive, but look, that didn't work with homosexuality. No, you're dealing with something deeper than that. We're going to have a more meaningful response without compromising Scripture. That is the balance we have to try to achieve. Let's listen to Dr. Albert Mohler talk about the biblical worldview versus transgender ideology, all right? Let me see here. I got to get this back to where I think it's right at the 18-minute mark. All right, I'm going to start just a little before it. He's finishing up a discussion about stem cell research, abortion, and a lot of issues. And now he's going to transition into a discussion about transgender and the biblical worldview. Here we go.
Or insane to think that this is important. But Christians operating out of biblical conviction simply have to respond, if the sanctity of every single human life isn't important, then what is important? But next, speaking about what the world around us finds increasingly irrational, unthinkable, maybe even unimaginable, the questions that were posed by Dr. Rand Paul, Senator Rand Paul, in the confirmation hearings for Dr. Rachel Levine to become the new Assistant Secretary for the Department of Health and Human Services, the questions asked by Senator Paul are being dismissed as absolutely backwards, anti-trans, according to a headline in the Washington Post, immoral and wrong. For that matter, even medically inaccurate. It's not an accident here that Senator Paul is a medical doctor, in this case, an ophthalmologist. But what we're looking at is the fact that we are living in a society in which it either does or does not make sense to you that Senator Paul would have asked these questions. It does or does not make sense to you that much of what's now going under the name of gender alignment treatment is actually the mutilation and the hormonal mistreatment of American children and young people. American adults, too. But adults are at least making the decisions for themselves as adults. When it comes to children and teenagers, we have to recognize we are now entering an era of such moral insanity that there are people who are simply presenting now as the normal standard of care and the normal practices, the moral practices of medicine, and the right understanding of all people who think rightly everywhere and anywhere is that you should allow for the gender transition of children or teenagers upon their own demand. They are to be answered with hormonal treatments and potentially even surgery that would supposedly change their gender identity from male to female or female to male or somewhere in between, and what is now celebrated in another effort at cultural insanity as the gender non-binary, the rejection of any gender binary. Well, what we're looking at here is the fact that Senator Paul did use very explicit language in his questioning of Dr. Levine. At one point, he spoke of genital mutilation of children and adolescents. Now, it's really interesting. This is the reason I'm bringing this up today. And folks, if this seems to be shocking material, I want to tell you we are talking about what should be shocking, and I'm going to tell you, you do need to know about this. Teenagers and adults in particular need to know about this as Christians. We need to know that the mentality of our age is that it makes sense to emasculate a teenage boy or to remove the reproductive organs and secondary characteristics of a teenage girl in the name of what is now in Orwellian speech redefined as gender alignment. NBC News ran a story with a headline, Rand Paul criticized for transgender mutilation remarks in Rachel Levine hearing. Well, that's exactly right. The press has formed a posse to go at Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, saying that he is guilty of using language that is morally inflammatory, not right in its context, and medically inaccurate. Well, Dr. Paul here is not speaking with medical inaccuracy. He's speaking of the truth. Now, let me just point to the fact that there is much reporting telling us that when you're looking at the actual surgical procedures, the world authorities who are consensually deciding the standards for transgender treatment have decided that surgical intervention should not take place until someone has reached the age of consent. The age of becoming a legal adult in the United States is currently 18. But let me just remind you that 18 and 19-year-olds are still teenagers. They are still teenagers. We're reminded of the reality that most states in the United States do not consider an 18 and a 19-year-old old enough to purchase beverage alcohol. That age in most states is 21 as a minimum. But we're saying here that the standards of care are that an 18 or 19-year-old can actually opt for genital surgery. And let's also look at the fact that when we talk about the term that Senator Paul used here, genital mutilation, that's a very graphic term. And we have to take responsibility for our language. Senator Paul has to take responsibility for his language. I actually think that he was responsible in using that language. Here's the point I want to make. You have to come up with some way of describing what we're talking about here. And at this point, I want to take us back to the Washington Post article, in this case, the article by Monica Hesse. She includes the statement that Senator Paul, quote, in a tirade, quote, also conflated genital mutilation, and then in parentheses she writes, a horrifying practice that public health experts view as a human rights violation, with the transition-related surgeries chosen by some transgender individuals to help their bodies conform with their gender identity, end quote. Now, let me just tell you, there are a lot of basic divides in the world, but right now, I want to point to the basic divide between the people to whom that kind of sentence makes sense and the people to whom that kind of sentence can never make sense. On both sides of that divide, people will say they are acting on behalf of human flourishing and human well-being. But on one side of the divide that says, yes, you should not surgically try to change a person's sex. On that side of the divide are people who believe that God has given a gift in our identity, that there is a creator who has made us in his image, and that our body is a part of the revelation to us as to who we are. On the other side of the divide are those who are arguing that human beings are basically plastic, that we have an inner identity that must be corresponded now with an outward reality, both in social presentation and even when it comes to the alignment of our bodies. Let me just point out, this is a basic, irresolvable conflict between the modern secular worldview and a biblical worldview. But when you are talking about the surgical castration of a teenage boy, or when you're talking about the surgical removal of reproductive capacity, reproductive organs, and secondary characteristics from teenage girls, and remember, 18 and 19-year-olds are still teenagers. And furthermore, when you're talking about using hormone-blocking drugs on children and teenagers in order to avoid them going through the normal process of puberty associated with their sex, the reality is that also, though not classified as surgical, is a medical intervention that amounts to a deliberate interruption of the process that God has put in place. By the way, even if you're operating from an explicitly secular worldview on these issues, consider the evasive non-answer given by Dr. Levine not once but twice to Senator Paul. Quote, transgender medicine is a very complex and nuanced field with robust research and standards of care that have been developed, end quote. You can tell that wording was hammered out and just repeated as a non-answer. But what's claimed here is that we're looking at a very complex and nuanced field. Read that to say you don't know enough to think about it. And then we're told that there's robust research. Oh, really? Well, let's just remember the fact that the transgender revolution is so recent, there is no research of adequate length, even medically, to tell us the results long term of this kind of intervention and surgical procedure or hormone blocking. But then Dr. Levine's statement went on to say there are standards of care that have been developed. Yes, well, but that again is not really intellectually honest. Yes, there are standards of care that have been developed, actually quite recently, and they are still in development and will be developing. This is not an adequate answer, and Senator Paul knew it, and frankly, the people who are behind Dr. Levine's nomination knew it as well. One last issue on this. There are many people jumping on Rand Paul and others saying that they are making much of Dr. Levine's transgender identity. Well, that's what they were given. It was the Biden administration that in its own headlines made very clear that it was claiming a great victory for diversity in naming the individual who, if confirmed, would be the first Senate-confirmed transgender person to serve in the American government. It's a bit late for those on the left to claim that someone's making a big issue out of the transgender identity of the nominee. They did it. They had a point to make. They made it. We have our points to make as well. This is another situation in which what is demanded of Christians is that we surrender to the inevitable and stay quiet, or else. Thanks for listening to The Briefing. For more information,
there you have Dr. Albert Mohler trying to look at these issues. He brought up a lot of points there, but he's trying to show you there's this great divide that is taking place. There is this great divide, which I've tried to articulate. We've got a major shift happening in culture, and we've got to come along and say, how do we deal with this? How do we talk about this? Now, now look, I think it's insane that anybody, Christian, non-Christian, would even come close to supporting any kind of gender transition surgery and hormone blockers and anything for children. That's when the world has definitely stepped over some cliff that I'm just blown away by. You're going to allow a child or children and support in any way, shape, or form any of that to happen. That is where things get really, really, really crazy, because you're talking about young people. And yes, a young person may feel that they don't identify. They may feel all kinds of things, but we all felt lots of things as a young person. And those feelings are very transitional, very much changing, and they're changing all the time. And you can't go do these, surgical procedures that are basically irreversible to children. I think we can all hopefully. The fact that society can't even come up to a complete agreement on that is somewhat disturbing. Now, right now, higher up in the medical world, they're like, no, you've got to be 18 or 19. And I think even 18 and 19 is questionable, considering you can't buy alcohol until you're 21. I agree with Dr. Albert Mohler there. But this is happening. Now, we could ask, why are more and more people coming out saying that they don't identify with their biological sex? Is there something going on within society? Is this a new trend? Is something happening? Does this have anything to do with just society will be always, moving in a downward trend? And as the church, as we reach closer and closer to the return of Christ, these things are going to become more prominent. You could discuss that, but I think that what we have to do, and again, I don't have any clear answers on this, is that we have to at least acknowledge that because of depravity, people can be born with lots of feelings and ideas that is a result of that depravity. And just denying that exists doesn't really fix anything. We have to try to deal with the people with these feelings. Now, I still think, I know medically people would disagree, but I still think that somehow our gender has to be connected to our biology. I know that they're claiming they disagree with that. I know, and biblically, obviously the Bible does not the Bible doesn't see it as being different, but the Bible obviously doesn't have any lengthy passages trying to even deal with this kind of subject. I mean, it just says you're created male and female, there you go, and then it addresses everyone as male or female, and that's the way it goes. And clearly there's to be a distinction between male and female. I think we could say the Bible would carry that out as well. So I have a hard time. I understand the science. And so if I'm talking to someone who's lost and they're pulling up all of these scientific arguments, I'm not going to sit. I mean, what am I going to do? Argue and say, no. We all have to agree. I think we have to look at where we can agree. This is what I would hopefully try to find as common ground. I would hope no one, no minor, no child should be subjected to hormone replacement therapy, surgical procedures to do any kind of transitioning someone from male to female with their body to go with their supposed identity that they're currently experiencing as a young person. I think you have to wait at a minimum of the age of 18. I would hope that we could find common ground there. I'm afraid that society is not even going to go there. It's just going to be, who knows? 10 years from now, 8-year-old, 10-year-old goes, you know what? I feel like I'm a girl. Okay, well then we'll start the process now. I would hope at some point society would wake up. I would hope some point. I would pray. But, as the world continues to descend, downward and downward and downward. I hope that would never happen. I would hope, because You would think 15, 20, you would think after that generation grows up that they would start going, man, I don't know if this was the right thing to do. You would hope that, who knows? But I hope we can at least agree with that. Second, I hope we can all agree that everyone, at least in their sex, is born either male or female, other than if any kind of, something happened during birth, some kind of birth defect, something like that happens. But typically, I think we can all agree, a person in their sex is either born a male or a female. That has to be agreed upon. Genetically, physically, that's just the fact, male or female. I have no problem acknowledging that some people are born and grow up, and even as an adult, for whatever reason it is, they don't identify with the sex they were born as. Now, I think at that point we have to ask ourselves, okay, they don't identify that way. I think we can all agree that is a factual thing. There are people who don't agree that they don't identify with the sex they were born as. I think we can all agree that there are people that way who clearly feel that way. Now, is there any agreed upon explanation to why they don't feel that way? And is the only solution is you don't identify with the sex that you're born as? Is the only solution then is to then take these radical steps to, and I'm not going to sit there and throw out the term mutilation just to throw it out there. I will just say you take these radical you take radical steps to engage in a surgical intervention to try to make your body now agree with how you feel. Is that the only solution? Is it not possible that what we need to do is say, could it be that you don't identify with the sex you were born as, and that indicates something else is going on? There's something else wrong. Like, now maybe the solution isn't to simply try to force your body through radical surgical intervention to agree with your feelings. Maybe we need to work to get your feelings to agree with what we all agree is you're born is a male or a female. To agree with your genetic makeup and your anatomy. Is it possible that would be a better solution? Like you really come down to two solutions. Solution is you don't identify with your sex, so now you take radical surgical intervention to make it work, to make it coincide with your feelings. Change your body to fit your feelings. Or is it better to work on your feelings corresponding with your body and your genetics? Like, those are, that to me, why is there only one option? Now, some people would say, no, there are other options, and I understand that. And for some, they will say, but you can explore that option, but if the person persists, you allow them to intervene. Now, you start talking with adults, it's their, I will argue that it's their body. And I say that in the sense that obviously abortion, you're dealing with another body, another human being, but in this case, it's their body. They are a person, and if you give them that freedom to do so, okay. But I don't know what the law. I don't think anyone knows what the long-term implications are going to be. Someone at 23 takes radical surgical intervention to change their body to fit how they feel. 20 years later, 30 years later, what happens? What's going to be the long-term consequences? We're not talking about simply dressing up. We're not simply talking about putting on some makeup or taking off the makeup and cutting your hair, or we're not talking about simple cosmetic changes with clothing and hair and makeup. We're talking radical surgical procedures and going with the very hormones your body produces, either suppressing them or introducing hormones into your body that weren't presently there. Like that's radical intervention, simply to force your body into corresponding with how you feel. The feeling, so in this case, feeling how you feel, because identity, that's a feeling. We all have to acknowledge that's a feeling. The feeling becomes the standard of truth. And your body and your genetic makeup now can be made that can be forced to change, to surrender. So the ultimate truth is feeling, not anatomy and genetics. So now the feeling trumps the body and the genetics. So we force the body, or when we say force, you may choose to do so, but you're choosing to try to force that body through radical surgical intervention to correspond to feeling. And let me just throw this out there, is what we're seeing with gender identity, that we're separating sex from identity, is this a symptom? Now, bear with me here. Now, I spent a lot of time to try to get to this point here, okay? Is it a symptom of a society where feelings determine truth? We can sit here, and again, I do this because this is where I always try to go as a Christian. We've got to look at the deeper issue. Like, we can get all caught up on, oh no, I'm going to use this pronoun, I'm going to use this pronoun, I'm not going to use your desired pronoun. We always want to fight these battles, to me, in the wrong area. We want to fight this area. Like, I'm not going to use your pronoun. No, I'm going to call you names, and I'm going to be condescending. Well, let's look at what's really going on here. To me, what's really going on here is now feeling is reality, and anatomy and genetics are now made to conform to those feelings. So is this simply what we're seeing playing out with the transgender world? Is it simply a deeper issue of now feeling determines truth? Now, if you think about, there's been a progression in society. We threw out absolute truth, right? Remember, relativism became the dominant philosophical system here in the United States of America and around the world. Truth is basically what you feel that it is. Well, if truth now becomes what you feel that it is, well, then why wouldn't sex, why wouldn't biology, why wouldn't genetics basically be what you feel they are? So we've got a society where your feelings determine reality. And if your feelings determine reality, then whatever that reality is has to be changed to conform to your feelings. Everything has to conform to feelings. Are we not seeing that play out everywhere in society? You have a feeling that something is offensive. You have a feeling that something is wrong. So then what should happen? Society should cancel it, should silence it, because it goes against your feelings. We talk about cancel culture. Isn't cancel culture another symptom of feelings determining what reality is? Is the deeper issue here, what is going to determine truth? Feelings or something else? Do feelings determine truth? Do feelings determine morality? Some people say society determines morality, but I've got an article right here about China. In fact, let me pull this up really quick. I know we're almost at an hour. Let me just pull this up because I think this adds to this conversation. Let me look at it really quick. See here. I got to find it. Yeah, homosexuality can be called a mental disorder, Chinese court rules. LGBT community disappointed. This is from the South China Morning Post. South China Morning Post. Let me say that headline again. Homosexuality can be called a mental disorder, Chinese court rules. Well, okay, that's society determining what's real. Well, so are they right or are they wrong? Remember when you get into a discussion with lost people, they're like, society says there can be more than one gender. And you're like, well, society can also say this. Well, no, that society can be wrong. So does society determine it? Look, here's the reality. We've reached a point in society that here's the greater problem, that now feelings is the thing that determines reality and determines truth. That's where we are in a society. We've reached, basically, society has returned back to the book of Judges. Everyone, not that everyone does what is right in their own eyes. We've taken it a step further. Now everyone determines reality by what they want to see and how they feel. It's not like everyone does what's right in their own eyes. Now everyone determines what is real in their own eyes. This is really the issue. The issue isn't, okay, we're going to argue about their pronouns. We're going to call them names. We're going to argue, no, you really weren't born that way. No, they may have been born that way, but it's a feeling. If identity is how you feel, about yourself. That's a feeling. There's no way to get around that is a feeling. Maybe there's a scientific or medical way to say it's not a feeling, but it's a feeling. It's an emotion. And if there's one thing I know about emotions, is emotions are not in any way, shape, or form a good indicator of reality. Reality cannot be determined by emotion. Emotions literally mislead you about reality. You can get emotional thinking, okay, that's the way the situation is, but you're completely blinded by emotion. Emotion exaggerates. Emotions misrepresent. Emotions deceive. Christianity says, no, my emotions and my feelings have to be subjected to a different standard. And for us, it's the Creator. It's His Word. So science may say sex, that sex is just your biology. It's just your anatomy. It's just your genetic makeup. But gender is something different. They may say that, but that gender identity, you have to acknowledge, is a feeling. So I think, what we're really witnessing is that feeling now trumps, it now overrides your physical attributes, your anatomy, and your genetic makeup. And then you engage in radical surgical intervention to make your body, you can't change the genetic makeup, but to make your body conform to your feelings. And I think that's a symptom. It's not the problem. It's a symptom of a society where feeling now trumps all. And we see it in the church as well. I feel a certain way, then we try to make the Bible correspond to our feelings. So I think I spent a lot of time to try to get to that conclusion. All right. I know there's a long way around, but I want us working through that. I think that's where we are. All right. So for me, I'm not going to argue about people's pronouns. You want to be a pronoun? Okay, I'll use whatever pronoun you want. He, they, you, whatever pronouns you want. I don't care. I'm not here to argue about your pronouns. We've got a deeper issue here. What is truth? What is reality? Your feelings? Your feelings? Well, I don't like it. So I want the world to correspond to my feelings by canceling and silencing any dissenting voices. That's feeling over anything. It's not even about whether something is true. You don't like what it sounds, we're going to cancel it. We're going to cancel it. Right now, there's a whole big discussion happening between, I guess, millennials and Generation Z, Gen Z and millennials about, against canceling Eminem, the rapper Eminem. Now, yes, we could get into his lyrics greatly offensive, and sometimes says some things very offensive to a lot of people. But so, hey, we don't like what he says, so we want him silenced because our what we feel, that should be reality for everyone else. His words are offensive, so silence him because we feel that it's wrong, so it should be wrong for everyone, and no one should be able to listen to him, and he should be canceled, he should be silenced, and he should be removed. What is that? See, that's feeling over everything else. I think we've stumbled onto something. I think I could be wrong, but I think that's where we need to take this argument. We should all be able to agree that no child should have radical surgical intervention to correspond to their feeling. I think we can all agree with that. I think we should be able to agree with that. You would hope that we can all agree that people are born, other than something happening with a birth defect, that they're born either a male or female, true with their anatomy and true genetically. Now, the issue is, and I can even agree that some people are born and don't identify with their sex. I can even agree that people are born that way. Now, the issue is, what should be done? That feeling that way, that's a feeling. That's an emotion, right? Maybe that emotion has been there forever, but what should be done? Do you change the biology and the anatomy to correspond to the feeling, or do you try to get the feeling to correspond to the anatomy and the genetics? That's the issue. But the deeper issue is it's about feelings over everything else. Now, this some people who listen to my podcast don't get it. This is me engaging in a conversation, throwing stream of consciousness, to spark a conversation, to spark your own struggle, other than just coming at this being very like, boom, 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 this is the way it is. I'm throwing out ideas to get you thinking, and hopefully you'll benefit from that. All right, I'm going to have to stop right there. That took a lot longer than I wanted, but I'm still processing. Look, society is changing. It's just a fact. Society is changing. We're going to have these difficult conversations. Every church needs to be having these conversations. I'm very much thinking about on Sunday, starting the Sunday school hour, just telling everyone, hey, for the next maybe hour and 30 minutes, that what we may take up the Sunday school hour and the morning worship service, just really struggling with how, as a church, we move forward in a culture where this is where we're going. And I may do that. And a lot of people, my church will be used to that kind of thing. People listening will be like, wait, what are they doing? Because we need to have these kinds of conversations. We have to. And again, I think a lot of the fight we had with homosexuality, you can't be born that way, you can't be born that way, was a foolish argument. I think sometimes we fight the wrong thing. You want to fight about pronouns. No, we need to be fight about, there's a deeper issue here about feelings versus reality. I think that is sometimes we need it to think of it that way. All right. Hopefully it was beneficial. I'll stop right there. You can email me all of your disagreements. I'm assuming by the time this gets posted on YouTube, we'll be down to 2 subscribers. We're definitely going to go down. We're already on a downward trend today. So I apologize to everyone I'm about to offend, but I think I tried to be very thoughtful. I try to offer all kinds of different perspectives, and I tried to share my own struggle with trying to figure out how we, as Christians, where we're supposed to be fixed, not tossed to and fro with every wind of doctrine, how do we stand in a firm standing in a world that's being tossed to and fro with every kind of ideology right now and is rapidly changing, and we have to figure out how to at least address that change. All right, newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. God bless.